Welcome to our conversation about leadership development in early childhood education, focusing on Tier 2 leadership, but of course our own leadership practices. I am here with a wonderful panel today of people. My name is Nakai Dejan. I'm the owner of Career Training Group and KSL Consulting. We are so excited to bring this conversation to you to understand more about leadership because we know it's so crucially important to our organizations. So I'm going to start by letting our panel introduce themselves, and then we'll get started in our conversation.
Thank you so much, Nakai. My name is Sophia Scarano. I am the Senior Programs Manager at Propeller. I work primarily with our education entrepreneurs through a slate of programs. We've got a lot of resources that we're making available to Orleans Parish and outside. And I'll say a little bit more about our programs at the end.
Beautiful.
Terrific. I'm Desiree Young. My company is called Venture Walk. I work with small business owners as well as the programs that look to support them. My primary focus is around sales, selling, and all things building their business.
Beautiful.
Thanks for having me. My name is Eric Pasquich. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship at Propeller. We grow and support entrepreneurs to tackle social and environmental disparities, and my role at the organization is to ensure that our early childhood education programs, accelerated programs, and alumni services run as smoothly as possible. So really excited for this conversation today.
Awesome. So we have a great panel today, and also just to share a little bit more about Career Training Group. We're a training and workforce development organization focused on early education to help teachers all the way up to business leaders and executives to really develop their business, their leadership, and also their practices to help expand the quality of early childhood education. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. So to get us started, I'm going to kick the first question to you, Desiree. So as we know, many leaders start organizations and they have a strong mission, but building the right team is often harder than we think in building the business. And so what have you learned about identifying or helping organizations really identify the right people to bring into their leadership circles?
I love this question because admittedly, I'm usually called in when they have the wrong people in the seats. And so for me, it's usually we're reverse engineering what's happening. And most often, I'm called in when it comes to that sales, that marketing role, or one that's customer client facing. One of the pieces we start with every single time is the clarity on what they really want and need. And this really allows less emotional decisions to be made. My earliest experience in entrepreneurship was working with child care centers. And one of the things I knew is that most often these were women, and most often these were women that were impactful in their communities and had a heart to help and serve. As a result, their hiring opportunities normally became helping opportunities.
Yes.
So that they were getting friends, they were getting family, they were getting those that needed the work versus those that were the best fit for the positions. And so before looking at who to help, the first piece is mirror work. How can I get helped? And so just getting very clear. And so most often I'm talking to entrepreneurs to write down or log where are you spending your time, literally moment by moment, day by day, and looking at a few weeks of that and saying, here are the areas I know I can and should delegate, that I should perhaps systemize, and now can that be an actual role? And again, this supports not looking just at the people first, but next is certainly now what types of skills are needed here. Which ones are training specific, which ones are just going to be more so around their own characteristics. And then and only then do we start to look at who can really be good fits for this.
Oh my gosh, I'm jumping out of my skin because you said fundamentally you're right. Early education is a high pressure industry in general, so a lot of times we're just hiring out of need. But to your point, not actually going to the business and looking at, okay, what does the business need? How can I support it? What's the right person? Do they have the skills? Because, a lot of times we have compliance and ratios and requirements that have to be dealt with in an immediate sense. So it doesn't create the space to really be thoughtful like that. But what you just laid out, I think, is just such a beautiful way of going about that process to really look and see okay, is there a role that I can identify a person and skills to be able to fill? And then how do I train? How do I find that person to really be able to do that? And take all the pressure of just trying to solve the problem in the moment.
100%. And they're problem solvers. And so to your point, so much of this is the pause, and it is a difficult thing to do because most of the time hiring happens when it has to.
Exactly.
And my biggest thing is, how can we start to really build the well before you're thirsty? And so starting to think of that, and also recognizing that those roles may need to change as the business does. That same person may or may not be ideal as the business adjusts and changes.
That is so good. That's so good. So to piggyback off of that, Eric, many organizations rely not only on staff, but in this industry, sometimes you do need consultants or vendors or like an external team and partners. So how do you decide what should be handled internally versus with partners and externally, to kind of talk to what Desiree talked about, being able to fill those gaps?
It's a great question, because figuring out ways to effectively delegate your work out into different roles and responsibilities is the key to growing your business and your organization. In my mind, I think for early stage entrepreneurs in particular, when you're evaluating whether to outsource something, whether to keep it in-house, my thought process is, let's focus on your core business. The core things that are relevant to your mission and delivering that mission at a high level, in my opinion, should stay in-house. But with that said, there's a variety of activities that have to get done that some are closer to the mission than others, right? Bookkeeping, for example, is something that has to get done in order for a facility to continue operations, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen in-house, right? So being able to understand where you can delegate those things out as far as how far away is it from your mission, I think is one really important piece. I think it's also important, going back to the earlier question, of understanding yourself. When you're trying to cultivate your leadership team around you, when you're trying to understand where am I putting this work, I think you have to understand for yourself what gives me energy, what drains my energy, and start to kind of build your team to complement those aspects. And just in terms of partnerships, I really think it's about figuring out ways for the puzzle pieces to come together. That when we look at different partnerships, we really should be, evaluating, how does this fit into my larger plan to grow my organization? I've worked with some organizations who work with a partner on transportation as a stepping stone to get them to the point where they can purchase their own transportation. So it's really just about understanding how do all these resources and processes for different partners align, and when do they don't.
I love that. Like, how close is it to your mission? And I say, build on your strengths, outsource your weaknesses. And so, like, you can't, if you already feel like I'm at a deficit on this thing, being able to acknowledge it and say, okay, is there someone else or is there another partner who can help me with this, is always going to be a good strategy. Also, partners bring expertise, right? Because we do not know everything. It's a million things that sometimes we have to know in early education. And when you're able to bring partners in, they also bring that expertise. So it helps you, to your example, be able to climb the learning curve a lot faster. And then maybe you can be able to bring it in-house at some point. But really being able to look at your internal and external team is super important. I'm going to ask you a piggyback question, though. Because I've worked with a lot of providers and a lot of centers who, yes, they have outsourced their weaknesses. And one example I would use is like the record keeping, right? But they have no communication. So it's like they bring in partners or they bring in different consultants, but they hand it over to them 100%, and then they don't have like a line of sight on it.
That's a great point. And really, it's about setting up yourself to delegate effectively, really. That just being able to hand off a task and say, go keep my books up to date or whatever, isn't necessarily enough information for the job to be done well, right? So as much as possible, if we're able to really line up what are the roles that we're trying to outsource, what are the clear indicators of success or failure in this area, and that we can communicate those things up front, I think you'll find that outsourcing is going to go a lot more smoothly as opposed to just trying to outsource a task right from the jump.
Yes, I agree. I think one thread that's being like woven through this conversation is thoughtfulness, right? Leadership is truly about thoughtfulness and giving yourself the space to think about what it is that you're trying to execute. So to piggyback off of Eric, communication, Okay, everybody says communication is key. It's cliche, but it's true. That's why we keep saying it. Communication is often the difference between a strong team and a struggling team. So, what systems or habits help keep communication clear across staff, partners, and stakeholders?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that providers can do and center directors can do, just to sort of, like you said, like be thoughtful about how they're communicating with their teams, communicating with their community as well. Communication is key, but also clearness is kind too. Clarity is like kind. And so I think that that is something that you can like build into the values that you carry with you into communicating with your team. I like a daily huddle. I think especially for a team, if you have a center with 25 to 50 kids, you have at least 4 to 5 staff members, and they're going to need to know what the day is looking like. And so having that quick daily check-in to confirm the staff ratios, any facility issues or things that are coming up with families, and make sure that you're in compliance with the LDOE. I think one thing too is to consider the way that you communicate, the platform for it. It is great to have informal communication opportunities, especially if you're cultivating relationships with team members, but having a centralized system to communicate en masse is really, really helpful to track and communicate your impact as well. Making sure that everybody's on the same page about what we're talking about. There's the alphabet soup of early childcare. Maybe your team members don't know all of the acronyms, but having a key somewhere they can reflect and understand, okay, this is what we're talking about, and how we communicate with the variety of lead agencies and partner organizations that are supporting the ECE ecosystem. And then something else that providers can do when, we know that especially in this region we have hurricane season, is to prepare for those potential crises. You always want to be prepared, even, we're hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. And so having this hurricane and holiday protocol is really, really helpful, especially when you're thinking about your strategy for managing and enduring a storm. Or some crisis that comes up. And so I think having a plan right now of who is going to communicate with families, who is going to manage the facility, who is going to be in contact with lead agencies, and finding updates from the state, and just being proactive in that way, I think is really, really helpful for making sure that you are not stressed. And it's similar to we want to build the well before we need the water. I think that's part of it for sure.
Awesome. I will just say piggyback off that, because I think communication is a universal skill, right? So no matter what you do, theoretically you would like to grow and develop in your communication. So to piggyback off a couple points you made, communication is a skill, so it's something that can be developed, but it's also a system, right? And being able to build a good, healthy system of communication so you actually get the outputs that you want. If anybody has worked with leaders or organizations for a while, I feel like one phrase we always hear is, I told them. If I hear I told them one more time, because they didn't do it, right? So there was a breakdown in communication somewhere, right? In your system, there has been a breakdown. So yes, I understand you told them, but how are we getting to the intended outcomes? And I think that also requires us to dig into our definitions, because we all sometimes need something different when we say communicate. So to the person or the leader saying, oh, well, I told them, that's giving you a good window into what their definition of communication is. If I give it one way, it's done, I've communicated, right? It doesn't allow for, okay, so how does that come back to you? What is the other part of the system? And so we have to dig into our definitions. And then also just realize the time that we're living in, we live in a world that has a lot of noise. So even though we're speaking, even though we may be communicating, there is so much noise that people are dealing with externally and internally that I feel like in a lot of ways communication is being blocked and is being hindered, maybe in even different ways that we haven't experienced it before.
I so agree. I love that you mentioned systems and Sophia mentioned skills, because for me, I'm usually trying to support a communications culture.
Mhm.
And so you brought up the huddle, which to me is so ideal, as well as kind of this idea of a bookend huddle, meaning when there's been something that's been given to a particular teammate, even if it happens outside of that initial meeting, now having a culture of report back to me once it's complete. And it so takes away the whole, have you done it yet? Was this done? And any of the stuff that can come with it. And it now creates this sense of, I've been assigned something, and now there's this accountability that I now am responsible for. And by doing that, starting with the leader, allowing themselves to be called on it,
Yes.
as well as teammates, to me is really where that culture starts to be embraced. It's not just a select few, but everyone. There's this sense of, I've been assigned this, and now by the end of the day, there's some responsibility on me to let them know that it's been completed or where it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that you talk about culture too, because I think this really goes back to your values, right? If you have a value in your organization of accountability, then how do you exercise that and like practice it and maintain this sort of like, how are you actionizing your value? That's how you develop culture. And if the culture is, I told you and you didn't, they just receive that and keep going about their business without, actionizing, without ownership over it, then you need to reflect on if your values are actually being reflected in the organization. And I like the idea of like, yes, we have these huddles, everybody's together, we have this like communication touch point that we can all count on, but then we also have a system built out where everybody can see what is going on. We are all accountable now. There's no excuse for something not getting done.
And if I can just add to that a little bit. I think I love the term that you tossed out about culture of communication and things like that. I think a culture of communication is kind of a downstream indicator of buy-in and ownership over your role within an organization. If you feel fully bought in, if you feel like you own your role and your position, you're going to be a lot more likely to be going out and communicating with other team members, being proactive and things like that. So if you're seeing, a gap in communication, that might be an indicator too of kind of going upstream and understanding, does everybody feel ownership and buy-in over their roles?
Yes, I love that. And another thought just came in, like even with the staff and the people that you have in your organization, the question becomes, are they a means to an end or are they an asset to your organization?
Yes.
Because if they're just a means to an end, like I need bodies in the classroom to check this box to do that, well then how well are you willing to communicate with them, as opposed to you see them as an asset. You want to invest in them. You want to make sure that they understand, they have the skills that they need, they have the resources, so that they can then turn around and really accomplish the task that you have for them. It all goes back to like your mindset as a leader, because even as we're talking, a lot of these things are like glued at the hip. You can't pull these things apart because one thing points to the next thing, points to the next thing. To your point, upstream and downstream, about you as the glue of your organization, as a leader. What do you think? How do you feel? What systems are you putting in place? How are you challenging and growing your staff to become better so that your organization becomes better? Wonderful. I love communication. I could talk about it all day because I'm like, we're talking to each other, but we're not saying anything. What's happening? Okay, so I'm gonna kick it back to you, Eric. Leaders often feel pressure to carry everything themselves, right? So how have you learned to delegate, distribute leadership, and avoid becoming the bottleneck in the organizations as you've helped to coach and help different organizations?
I love that question because I have been the bottleneck myself at different times. And it took me a while to reach the level of self-awareness to understand how and why I was the bottleneck and how to actually remove myself as a bottleneck. It's really about understanding yourself. You have to effectively delegate, right? Like I was saying earlier, clear expectations, painting a clear picture of what success looks like, makes those conversations around accountability and things like that much, much easier. If you've had those conversations at the outset, it's very easy to kind of call back to those earlier conversations and talk about the differences between what happened and what was expected, right? I think a few other things that come to mind is that, you have to empower people to grow in their roles, and growth inherently involves mistakes sometimes, and you have to give people the room to make mistakes in a safe manner. We are dealing with children in this industry. Safety is paramount, so we don't want those types of mistakes, but there is room for people to grow and learn if you're providing the clear feedback as they are going through that process. So as much as you can provide that clear and actionable feedback, and find ways to reward growth. And a lot of people think off the top of their head monetarily, which is always great, but even just a simple word of praise can go a very, very long way on that front.
Yes.
If I can add to that, I love, first off, the ownership area, because we've all been there, but his mentioning about assessing why you were the bottleneck, and that's usually what I have seen doesn't happen in the moment. Oftentimes, I believe to really get to this idea of delegation, it's almost getting more comfortable with risk. Because when I've spoken with business owners, especially in the childcare industry, the reason they're not delegating is they're not doing it right, they're not doing it fast enough, they're not doing it like me. And all things can be true at once. And so the big deal is if I delegate this, it won't get done properly, and now there's the risk of something breaking. And if that occurs, now the business owner is becoming the bottleneck because they're doing everything. So part of this is getting to that point of adjusting their expectations and recognizing they didn't hire miniature thems for real reasons, as well as starting to build real trust and doing that just like we do everything else, giving them smaller things, building that up, and also taking very conscious efforts to say, there's not anything that they can blow up, and then if they do, we will fix it. Because there's also got to be this sense of you're not going to get bamboozled because you break something. Now the trust is broken, but also the confidence, like you alluded to, is broken. So there's got to be this sense of, all right, some things will break, we will fix them, but building the people, as Eric mentioned, is what's most important, and we're going to take that risk to allow that. Because I've seen the burnout, and the burnout happens because they're saying if it is to be, it's on me. And they're wearing the cape, and there are people that are sitting around that get accustomed to that, and they're like, well, you're going to do it anyway. So I'm not. And now that creates a different culture of avoidance. And I'm just going to do my little bit. And when they're even asked, they're like afraid because the confidence hasn't been built. So let's get comfortable with risk and breaking things.
When something breaks, it's an opportunity to like figure out why did that happen in the first place, and then we can make sure it doesn't happen, reduce that risk down the line. I think, great points.
It's so good. And I think, thank you, Eric, first of all, because I believe like creating safe space for leaders is so important, and acknowledging like this, if you're a leader, this is a struggle that we don't just talk about, we've experienced, right? The bottleneck effect, and really trying to dig into the emotions underneath it. Because to your point, sometimes it is avoidance, but also in this industry, I've seen a lot of, because we do have a lot of women in small businesses, people really connect their identity to their work. And so if it becomes an identity issue and not just a business problem, then that is a completely different conversation. And so unknowingly, sometimes we project those things, whether that be the insecurities, whether that be the abandonment, whether it be all of the emotions and the trauma and the triggers underneath the fact of why you have to do this. It may be broken, but just because this thing breaks doesn't mean you're broken. And sometimes being able to pull those things apart, I find is a more difficult conversation underneath this delegation because it is so personal. And to your point, when things break, sometimes staff back away because it becomes a personal attack, or it becomes something outside of the realm or the context of just doing business. And so being able to create safe spaces for leaders and say, hey, look, I know this hurts. Like, I'm just saying, I know it hurts. I know you want to do it because subconsciously it may be saying something about you. But let's try to walk this road of seeing what the effects of doing this may be. And so, to your point, thinking about what if you build a structure, but you're building a structure that has no guardrails, then you're either setting up people to really fail and get hurt, right? Or you have to acknowledge that you built something that is not safe for people to operate in. And so it's not just about them and about them breaking. Have you created an environment that's safe enough for people to be able to do just what we talk about the children, to be able to learn and to be able to grow and to be able to develop? And so being able to overlay that and model that same thing to our staff, because again, they're our assets. So being able to model that so that they can turn around and model that to their children, I think is so important.
Yeah. That's definitely that's part of the culture piece as well. When we talk about clear communication, value and accountability, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of being accountable, is taking care of your staff, taking care of yourself, and making sure that they're feeling empowered to also approach with graciousness, the classroom.
Exactly. And so to your point, because I think you mentioned burnout, when we have this type of environment of this culture, burnout is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like being able to see the future. I know if you keep operating like this, you will get burned out. So burnout is a real challenge for leaders and teams in all type of organizations. So Sophia, what strategies have helped you to build teams in organizations, build teams that support sustainability rather than just contact and crisis management?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a huge issue with turnover in this field, and I think that it makes sense because there's a lot of demand for it. And I mean, I keep going back to this point of we need to build the well before we're thirsty, but a lot of times people are getting into the business and are very dehydrated, very thirsty, and then just trying to find a Band-Aid solution. I think some of this can be approached in a sort of values and culture way, right? We don't want to define overextension as something that is expected. That is actually a system failure, and we should address it as such, right? So we can shift the narrative of celebrating staff who are practicing healthy boundaries, who are following protocols, building out systems so that they can prepare themselves for the day. Maybe this is something that you approach in your morning huddle, where it's okay, everybody is going to have some time for lesson planning and preparing themselves so that you're not donating time off the clock, right? The kids got to take a nap. During that time, you can have your breather and plan for the rest of the afternoon, the rest of the week. Every day you can chip away at it. And so building in structures like that over the course of the day to prevent folks from overexerting themselves, overworking themselves, can be really helpful in preventing that burnout. Making sure that your leadership is also modeling sustainability, right? I know a lot of leaders are, to your point, just you have a grip on your business. It's your baby. You want to care for it. And that means, in your mind, maybe I am answering texts and emails at 11 p.m. Your staff see that. And that is going to become part of the culture of okay, I understand that the director is firing off emails willy-nilly in the middle of the night, and so I just need to expect that my time is not going to be sacred to me. And there's a way to everybody has different working styles, and so there's maybe there are the leaders who are this is just my flow and I feel comfortable, I don't feel overextended, but your staff will see that. You can schedule those emails.
Yes.
You can schedule those texts to come through, in the morning during business hours that you preset, that the staff can be aware of. And it's okay, I know to expect communication. I know to expect workflows to happen within this set amount of time. If, your staff are receiving updates or communications at 11 p.m., they don't feel respected. And they also know to not, you're reinforcing this idea that their time is not to be respected as well. And I think those are a few ways that we can approach burnout, and just strategies to let's get a grip on the reins, pull it back a little bit so that folks know that they don't have to work outside the time that they are being compensated for.
Yes. I love that. Boundaries.
Boundaries.
I
so
say
key.
that, people, it's a bad word, boundaries, but it helps you so much because, to your point, the culture, but then also it's protection for you. It's those guardrails again, right? Because you can work yourself all the way down to below zero, but are you willing to risk it all? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for it. And some people say yes, I understand that. But also telling people you don't have to.
Yeah.
You could have a successful organization and not be stressed out, not be burnt out, not be emotionally drained and unavailable. Like, you could really run an organization that's thriving and still be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what a thought, right? And I just think this is something that's so personal for me, because even when I was working in a childcare center, I was the center director. I was in my mid to late 20s, and baby, I was stressed. Okay, I was getting sick. I was not taking care of myself. I was 28. I had shingles. I was so stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it was a thing. And so even in the position that I am now, being able to talk to and help so many educators and so many leaders to really say, okay, one of my approaches is wellness is workforce development.
Yeah.
Like, this is a strategy that you can use, but you have to start with you first.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to set those boundaries, understanding that, urgency is a trauma response. Like, something is triggering you where you can't rest, you have anxiety. And going back to, we talked about digging into our definitions, like, no, we need to talk about these things, because what you sometimes may be calling being productive is really anxiety, right? And so being able to sit down and really do a diagnostic or reflection on yourself and your practices. And I always ask people, I don't like to say good or bad, because some things work for some people that don't work for other people. My question, is it working for you? If you're doing this and you find yourself in a worse position, then I beg to say that maybe that is not working for you. And so being able to really reflect on your practices so that you don't get to a place where you're burnt out. And the whole notion of self-care, I feel like, has become, deflated.
Yeah.
In a sense. It's like a Band-Aid. Oh, if I'm feeling stressed out, let me do some self-care. Caring for yourself is really vitamins. It's doing what you need to do intentionally, on purpose, every day, to put yourself in a healthier state. Self-care is what people use self-care for now, is mostly medication. I'm just trying to medicate myself through this, as opposed to, like, take your vitamins every day and you won't be here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do you create those practices and that lifestyle where it's like, self-care is my vitamin. I do these things so I'm all around a better, healthier person. So when I show up, I'm ready to give and I'm not giving out of a deficit. And so I think that those are the things that you have to start baking in to your life, your practice, your lifestyle daily, so that, number one, you embody it, but then number two, you model it, to your point, to your staff, so that they can be that as well.
Yeah.
But unhealthy people don't want to deal with healthy people, and vice versa. And so you also have to take an organizational stand, because as leaders, I also hear a lot of times, what is wrong, everything that's wrong with the staff. And I'm just like,
but they're your
it's
staff.
in the water.
Right.
It's in the water, right? Because that is what can grow in the environment that you've created.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you want something else to grow, you have to create a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point too. Is like, if the problem is with everybody, there's a common denominator, right? Like, we got to go back to the source. We got to go back to the point. But to your point of, like, building in this, like, culture and, like, letting it be, like, leadership down, acknowledging your healthy practices, your vitamins, your systems that you're using every day to maintain, like, a healthy and happy work environment, is also acknowledging when your staff are practicing healthy habits.
Mm-hmm.
When you can acknowledge when they're doing what they're supposed to do in the time that they're given for it, they're operating with efficiency and not doing too much extra, not, embodying an attitude of anxiety or something like that, calling attention and praise. I think praise is important, and it's how people feel encouraged and know that they're on the right track in their growth.
Yes. And even, I'm going to let you go, Eric, but even in my staff, I tell them, push back, like, fight back. Don't, if I'm getting to a place, because I'm a worker. Like, I love to work. If I'm getting to a place where now I'm encroaching on what you feel like you need to be okay, then you help me pump the brakes, because boundaries are good.
Yeah.
And so let me know, even as, you know, I'm a big respect person. I feel like we can talk about anything in a respectful way. But if we're having something, like, nudge me and say, you know, hey, this is getting into my personal time. I'd love to help you, but can we table this to tomorrow? And being able to be a grown up and really like grow up in your emotional development is to be able to say, okay, that is the culture I set. What you said is actually the right thing that we need to do. I apologize. We'll be able to table this till tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to be all that. But you want to share something, Eric?
Yeah, just one other thing I would add to all of this is I think the name of the game in avoiding burnout is building in flexibility into your business. That early childhood education is a highly regulated industry that has very specific ways that you are supposed to go about this work. But with that said, how can we find ways to build in a little bit more flexibility so that we have the space to take care of ourselves, right? I know of one provider who allows some of their teachers to take one afternoon of remote work per week to, you know, align their lesson plans and do some of the admin work and things like that. That might not be a solution for every facility, but are there little ways, can we set little goals to build in just a little bit more flexibility into our operations steadily over time?
And I do love, Nakai, how you have your own conference that's all about wellness for this industry, because I do believe that the majority of the leaders, business owners, are really having to learn this for themselves. And to your point, it's not something you just instill, it's something you embody and live and therefore lead others. So many of them are incredible managers and they're very keen on all of the regulations, but when it comes to leading people and leading them in a healthy way and allowing boundaries and understanding what it means for true self-care that's embodied inside of the culture, it's completely new. Because often they've not, I'll say we've not come from that culturally. And oftentimes now there's this business environment where all you know and see is the work that needs to be done.
Right.
And making certain that children are protected. There's often the idea of the team members, it's their second thought as far as anything beyond the work that they're doing. And I've seen it's one side or the other. Either there's an over-functioning for team members, right? If there's a crisis in something, they are the first. The business owners, childcare owners are the first to get there and be to their aid. But then on the slant, on the other side of it, when it comes to we've got to do X, Y, Z, do it at all costs. And somewhere there's got to be this understanding of how do we find a better balancing act. Again, I'm not going to use the word balance because it's going to be high, be low, but how do we course correct? How do we now have a culture where each of us can say, hey, this is not what we said we were going to have it be, or we're not approaching it in the way we said we would. There's a better way.
Yeah. I think also, like, to this point of, like, understanding impact, it's really, really helpful to make sure your staff understand the why of why we're doing things. It's, you know, when you get in the weeds and you're just like in execution mode and there is urgency there, it's just hard to like feel like what you're doing makes a difference, and understanding the why behind tasks is really helpful for like regulating. Like, I know I can ascribe a certain amount of like value to this task. I can reprioritize based on my capacity because I understand the why behind what I'm doing. And I think especially when we're dealing with lead agencies and reporting and ratios, and there's a lot of things to consider in centers, understanding what things are a priority and what we can adjust so that, you know, we're not getting, like you said, we're not getting off track. We can course correct.
Very true. And the last point to this is also thinking about the next generation of business owners or the next generation of childcare providers, because I think we have to also, you know, talk about the generational hats that we wear also, and how a lot of providers, they do see work a certain way. The time that they were raised in, the environment that they were raised in, it is their filter in which they're bringing all of this through. But funny enough, I've been having more conversations with second gen owners or the daughters of women who own childcare centers and who are trying to like make the transition. And it was so funny. I was talking to one young lady who was stepping into the director role, and her mom was the owner, and she was like, "We need a support group." And I was like, I actually love this, because she was like, we are trying to balance like the shadow of our parents and also like the reality and the landscape that we live in, and trying to acknowledge like, yes, this culture is one way, but I really don't want to like reproduce that. And so how do I find my own way? How do I find my own wings? How do I like grow up into this thing and really help it to evolve? And so even, you know, I just did a session, and one thing that we were talking about was succession planning.
Yeah.
Child care providers are tired. If they've been doing this for 30 plus years, they're tired. And so the question is, well, do you want the work to end with you, or do you want it to go on? And so if you want the work to go on, what does succession look like? And that means bringing that next generation to the table and teaching them how to do the things that you're doing, but also giving them the freedom to have a different expression about it and to be able to do it differently. And so I have a closing question. This was so good. I could talk to y'all all day. And we hit on so many good points that I think if leaders and providers really lock in, is so many things, like threads that they can pull through this conversation to really help them to grow and to develop. So our final question to wrap it up, and I will start with Sophia and then we'll go around the table. What keeps you motivated to continue investing in people, teams, partnerships, even when the work gets difficult?
I think seeing the impact. And like practicing a lot of gratitude around the opportunity to work with such mission-driven, community-minded, invested people. I love working with Black women. I feel like when I look around at the people that I'm working with, I'm like, you all are revolutionary in your ability to practice and develop systems of care. And our economy does not run without childcare. We know that. This work is very important and it is undervalued. And so I think maintaining this sort of mindset of the work that I am supporting is the bedrock of our community and our future community's success. And yeah, just I really, really enjoy working with like the individuals who are they all have their unique experiences and perspectives on childcare, but come from a place of like just love, and it's like love in action, and I think that really keeps me going. Yeah.
I love that answer. I so do. For me, it's the development of the people. I learned pretty early on that I'm not in the business of small business. I am in the business of people development. It took longer though to recognize the skills around what I'm attempting to support them in learning was not usually just operations or management or sales or selling. It was exactly what you alluded to around identity and emotional acuity and really getting a good sense of what are my values and how do I lead from them. What are the outside social norms of what identities have been placed on me that are no longer serving me? And I can't and don't market that because it's not sexy, but it's the real work that goes on in the backdrop, because at the end of the day, the interest is to see people be changed, because that to me is how the impact happens.
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me in it. It's also what makes me often want to run from it. So it's a double-edged sword. But I love it because I think I also develop every single time I see this in someone else, and it just doesn't end. It's just level by level. And so at no point do we get an opportunity to say, oh, I haven't, fill in the blank. It's more so, look what I have done, been able to learn, what do I do now, what do I know now that I didn't before.
Love it.
Yeah, I think for me the motivation comes from, it's because it all matters. Every action we take, especially anybody working in early childhood education in particular, has massive ripple effects
Yes.
for decades down the
Yeah.
line, right? You're quite literally shaping our future, you know? And I think, I think a lot about, not to throw a very dated reference, but the movie It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
watch it every Christmas. And the gentleman's guardian angel takes him and shows him that the world would be so much worse of a place if he had never existed. And I wish I could do that with every early childhood education facility leader, every team member, because it truly does have ripple effects that go beyond what we could really imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I'm about to date myself too because I've never seen that movie, but I will.
Oh, you gotta watch it.
I will add it to the Christmas
Add it to the list.
I will add it to the list. I'm gonna steal a little bit from everybody's answer because for me, I truly think it is the people and giving a platform to people who don't have a voice, and shining the light on people who have not been seen and who have, like I said before, been used as a means to an end, and not having people really stop and say, "How are you? Who are you? What do you want to do? What are your dreams?" I know we could build this entire system, right, and try to get all these outputs, and along the way not be able to save the people, right? And so to me, it's just super important. And I will say it was one of the things I fought against the most because my natural personality, I'm very much an introvert. And so people generally exhaust me. But once it just clicked that this is really the thing that I'm supposed to be doing and being able to invest in people so that wherever they go, because in early ed, yes, some people may stay in the classroom, but we have a whole ecosystem that needs help beyond the classroom in every aspect of this field. And so how can I help to encourage and train and strengthen leaders all the way down and teachers all the way up so that at the end of the day, we have a better ecosystem. We have healthier people. We have smarter outcomes. And it's tough. It is a tough job and it's a tough industry sometimes to be in. But when you have people come back and just like with joy in their heart and tears in their eyes to just say, "You saw me," like that makes it all worth it for me because that could be a person who's never been seen before. And for that one reason that they decide that this is where they want to plant their flag.
Mm.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Nice.
Wow. How to follow that?
It's all to Eric's point, like it all matters what we do. And sometimes just being able to step back and really think and reflect on it gives us the strength and the courage to continue to go on. So it was a wonderful conversation. I know we're going to wrap up with some resources.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you, everybody. Round of applause for all of us. Eric introduced Propeller earlier, but we are an entrepreneur support organization. We grow and support our entrepreneurs to tackle social and environmental disparities. And it is just such an honor to work with the expertise that's in this room, but also to be in partnership with Career Training Group and KSL Consulting to continue bringing free resources to the ECE community. We all shared our why, so it's very obvious why we want to continue investing in this. But in the past few years, Propeller has really worked to build out a slate of programs. We have our Impact Accelerator. It's our flagship program. We are supporting entrepreneurs in expanding their operations and building connections and access to the resources they need to elevate their businesses. And so anybody who's interested in applying, we're currently recruiting in March 2026, but we'll be recruiting every year. So if folks are interested in perpetuity, we're here for the long haul. Folks are interested in applying to that program. Eric and I are both happy to talk to whoever about Propeller's resources within ECE and outside of it. We've also got our Excel workshop series, which is aimed at early learning providers and entrepreneurs and scaling their back office systems. So we talk about HR, we talk about finances, we talk about the onboarding process and center operations and growing your client base. There's a lot of really good resources and free technical assistance that's associated with that program. We also have our shared resources platform, which is a free web platform with over 2,600 editable tools and templates. We've made it free to Louisiana providers outside of Orleans Parish too. So that's something that we are really pushing folks to take advantage of. There's so much on this platform. I can't even. But I would go, breathless. I wouldn't be able to list everything that the platform has to offer. And then finally, we have our financial wellness collaborative that supports centers and other business owners in accessing capital and maintaining healthy financial systems. So, all of this that we bring to the community is informed by the community, and it's through working with partners like you. And so I think it's really, really great to be able to offer this for free, these free resources. And all of them are available on the website. If you want to check it out, you can go to gopropeller.org. Our events are on there along with all the resources and a variety of focus areas too. We don't just work in early childhood education, although that focus area is near and dear to my heart.
And I will give a plug. Desiree brought it up, but we have our Educators Assemble Conference that is going to be annually, but this year, October 15th through the 17th. And it is focused on wellness of a workforce, and really taking the time for educators to develop in their mental, physical health, financial wellness, and career development, because we truly believe healthy people build healthy organizations. And so your health is of utmost importance to us. So come out and enjoy that conference. It's going to be everything. So we invite everybody to come. And Career Training Group, we help ECE from the classroom to the boardroom. We help to train, development, workforce development. We are a safe space for educators to come and grow and develop. And so if you want to find out more about us, you can go to careertraininggroup.com. And just thank you so much to our guests for this beautiful conversation.